49. The last president inaugurated in the United States. The span of terrible days after the global comms blackout when the world was reshaped. The number of strange supernatural phenomena that appear around the globe. You're listening to The 49, the new series by Andrew Kooman. Get the content right in your inbox when you subscribe at the49.substack.com. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Welcome to the world of The 49.
Diez woke from the dream to the sound of his rescue barking. Duplo rarely made a noise. When he first saw the dog, he would hardly make eye contact. The shelter manager told him he'd come a long way, but turns out even gentle beasts, like the Australian Shepherd Poodle crossbreed, like other species, buried their trauma deep inside until it silenced them too. During the blackout and the chaos that followed, people weren't the only ones unhomed. There was an animal crisis too. Most survivors now living behind the walls were pet owners, whether they liked it or not. Another regulation that Diez thought, ultimately, was for the better. The loneliness and isolation was quickly overcome by man's best friend. It was one of the oddest and most humane developments that emerged as the fires were put out and as the order behind the walls was established. After so much loss of life, people did what they could to salvage as much of it as possible. Dogs flourished. Doodles, especially, were ascendant. "What's got into you?" Diez asked, rolling out of bed. He hit the start button on the coffee machine for his morning pot. The grinding beans were usually the first sound in the big penthouse. It wasn't a busy building. They'd given him a private pad. Hey, he said, as Duplo ran to him and then back to the door, still barking. "What is your deal this morning?" The dog calmed at the sound of his voice, but still barked. Who's here at this hour? He wondered. It was before 6 a.m. Diez tapped the panel beside the doorframe. A flat screen faded into place from the stone wall. It revealed the feed of the area outside his door, the only entrance to his dwelling from the outside. Rarely used. He never had visitors, and he took the private elevator to the underground to come to and from the parking garage below. "Hello?" he said. A man stood with his back to the camera. "Can I help you?" The man didn't move. "Listen, take your pranks somewhere else, okay? The sun's not even up. It's the hour when darkness reigns," the man said, and as he said it, he turned. A rush of cold swarmed Diez's body. "Father Diez, may I come in?" It was the governor. He was alone. Diez opened the door. He stood in his underwear, barely awake. The governor looked troubled. Has he been crying? Diez wondered. Duplo stopped barking. The sudden silence added to the eeriness of the moment. "Come in. Do you ever wear clothes? Feels like less and less these days." The governor nodded. He knew through a series of electronic memos how Diez felt about the games. "I was still in bed." The governor took a step toward the threshold. Duplo cowered and growled. The governor looked at the dog. "He's harmless. Duplo, go to your bed." The dog walked away, obediently, his eye lingering on the unexpected guest. "There's coffee on. I'll grab some clothes." Diez turned and pointed the governor to his living room. "Guest mode morning," he said as he walked by it toward the bedroom down a hall. The dark ambience of the early morning in the unoccupied space quickly changed. The light slowly faded from shadows into the warm tones of the early sunlight. The fireplace ignited. The original owners had spared no expense when they designed the open-concept living space. The 2-story living room had a step down from the hall and kitchen. A large square, framed by designer furniture. A massive stone fireplace was set in the westmost wall of glass that went from floor to ceiling. An astonishing lookout view of the Rockies, its generous offering. The fireplace was double-sided and could be enjoyed on both sides. In the living room, or from the other side of the wall, on the long balcony outside, where Diez often sat in the afternoons when he wasn't creating content or on a lot in LA ministering to those who were about to die. The mountains settled him like nothing else, gave perspective, named his smallness. The patio would have been the perfect place for barbecues after a round of golf or cocktail parties for the who's who of the corridor. Certainly, that's how it was designed. He had a single stone bench and a small bird bath. He meant to do more with it, but the mountains were enough. He couldn't fathom the money the owners must have invested to build it. It was governor-level nice. Diez returned barefoot in jeans and a t-shirt. He held 2 mugs of coffee. The governor stood, looking at the art mounted to the stone on the left side of the fireplace, itself 2 stories tall. "This is quite the piece. Rare." "Truly," Diez said, "and famously controversial. The original owners were true patrons, worked with collectors around the world to preserve great art. They rescued this from the National Gallery before Ottawa burned. What's it called? Voice of Fire. The painting, a long line of orange, centered on a blue canvas, like a large strip of salt water taffy, fell like a waterfall from floor to ceiling. I can see why it'd be controversial. All 543 centimeters of it," Diez replied. "Coffee? It's like the room was designed for the space. You gotta wonder if they set the whole world on fire to simply get their treasured art." The governor laughed at this. "Now, that's a theory of the 49 that I could get behind. Remaking the world, for love, of art." He looked around the room. "It has a peaceful feeling here." Diez nodded. He handed the governor a mug. "No house droids, though. I don't let them touch the coffee. Wise." The governor sipped his coffee and walked over to a console table behind a couch opposite the fire. He set his cup down and picked up the object that had caught his eye. "This is a strange piece, a relic of some sort, yes? From Strathmore." "Where?" Diez smiled. "A little town, not too far from here." The governor held a golden object in his hand. It looked like something one might receive at an award ceremony. Its oblong base extended at the top into a shape that suggested flames. At the center was a glass square that had a small white cloth encased. On the cloth was a drop of dried blood. Whose blood? Carol Watila's. Whose? Pope John Paul II. The governor put it down. "A member of the Sacred Heart Parish asked me to protect it. Their parish was burned to the ground before the blackout. I had been reporting on church fires before all..." Diez stopped. The governor looked up at him as he sipped his coffee. "Well before all this. So much has changed for you," the governor said. "So much has changed for all of us. You know, I've never understood this, what it is, it worship of relics. Not worship. Veneration," Diez said, gently. "Ah, that's the word I was looking for. So, what do? Pray to it." "Number. It took me some time to understand it myself. As you know, I'm not really what you'd call a real priest, not even a real Catholic to most. So, I've heard." An understatement. They both had paid for the bishop's selection of Diez as his successor, in different ways. I used to see it as praise, too. But the bishop, he told me, how did he say it? Think of them as family photos, Grandpa's favorite ring, or Grandma's favorite Bible, an object that helps us remember who a loved one was, what they were all about. The governor thought about this as he held the mug between both hands. He didn't say it out loud, but Diez was sure they both thought it. How will they remember me? He stepped away from the console and back into the center of the living room. "And what does this pope remind you of?" Diez sat down on a leather couch, long as a whale. It seemed to swallow him. He invited the governor to join him, to be not afraid. It was something he said frequently. He repeated it, often in one of his books. "I have a copy. I'm happy to lend it to you. And here we are." The governor smiled. "For not being a priest, you're pretty smooth, able to segue so easily to matters of the soul." Diez put his coffee down on the table between them. "Even the much-feared governor of Corridor West has one." The governor held his gaze. Up close, he looked like the man so frequently plastered on social feeds and news alerts, but there were permanent lines around his eyes and across his forehead. His face was almost perfectly symmetrical, but the symmetry was disrupted by a scar that cut from his right cheek to the top of his lip. His hair, mostly gray, was cut short. He was not a vain man. In an age when most people in the corridor, even much younger than him, underwent procedures to remove lines, he remained untouched. His eyes were a fierce green with flecks of brown and gold, not the eyes of a killer. Diez had looked into enough of those. The eyes of a visionary, a weary one. They looked tired. "Are you afraid of me?" When he said it, Duplo jumped up onto the governor's couch and sat beside him. The governor put his cup down on the table. The dog placed his snout on the governor's lap. He chuckled at this. "My dog isn't," Diez said. He studied the man. "You wouldn't be wrong to be," the governor said as he stroked the dog's head. "Maybe not right, either. May I ask you why you're here? Is there something weighing against your soul?" "The whole world weighs against it, Father." The governor opened his mouth to speak, then stopped. He picked up his coffee mug and stood up to look over the Rockies. Duplo jumped down. Diez pointed toward his room, and the dog left. "I'm not here to give my confession, if that's what you were wondering. I am here at your service," Diez said. The governor turned, and his face seemed white in shock. "The Foz," he finally whispered. When he said it, and before another word emerged from his lips, Diez was struck with a shock of energy, as if he'd been hit by lightning. "It's here within the walls."
Thanks for listening to this portion of The 49 by Andrew Kooman. New content drops for paid subscribers every Monday at the49.substack.com. That's the49.substack.com. On Tuesdays, we release new audio on all your favorite podcast platforms. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe and to share it with a friend. Thanks for listening to The 49.